Hello, YouTube. I have been searching for the evidence of the underwater humanoids worldwide to the extent possible for me. And one day I definitely want to go back to such places as Southern Africa. But today I will speak about Europe. In the north of Spain, in the heart of the Emerald Valley of the Paz, there's a small town of Yerganes. It is famous throughout the country for its healing springs and the architecture of houses in the style of montañas. The main treasure here is not the picturesque landscapes and the incomparable architecture. This region has long been shrouded in legends and myths, reliably protecting the priceless heritage of centuries gone by. It is here that the story of the amphibian man originates, which later actually became the basis of the famous novel of the same name by Alexander Belyaev in the USSR. It was a much beloved book and motion picture, and in the 1970s it was broadcast in the United States, translated on TV, but the Americans changed the ending, making it a happy story after all. But it was not originally a happy story. So, who was this amphibian man or the man-fish? Who was he really? In the small town of Yerganes in Cantabria in northern Spain, since the end of the 17th century, there has been a legend about a certain young man named Francisco. The young man allegedly drowned in the sea and a few years later returned as a hybrid of man and fish. Only he didn't become a merman in the full sense of the word. Francisco did not grow a tail, but his body was covered with scales and he had gills. One could treat this with a huge degree of skepticism, but the entire story has been carefully documented. A monk named Benito Jeronimo Feijoo had a reputation as a man of science with a very rational mind. This learned monk regularly debunked various myths and superstitions. But why did he believe in the story of the amphibian man? And who was the man-fish really? Feijoo wrote the following. In the middle of the 17th century, an ordinary family lived in the village of Yerganes. His father's name was Francisco de la Vega, and his mother was Maria del Casar. The couple had 4 sons. The family was very poor. When the head of the family died, the mother could not make ends meet and feed her children in any way. She decided to send her eldest son, named Francisco, to study carpentry in the city of Bilbao. The boy learned, grew up, and began to work in this field, in this area, helping his mother and brothers. One day, on the eve of St. John's Day, the young man went swimming with friends at the mouth of Bilbao River. Francisco was an excellent swimmer, but the current was so strong that it took him to the open sea, and everyone thought that he had drowned. It's been about 5 years since then. Once in the Bay of Cadiz, several men were fishing. As usual, fishermen were pulling nets. Suddenly, they noticed a very strange-looking creature that got there. They tried to drag it into the boat, but it deftly turned out and disappeared into the water. After that, different fishermen encountered the sea monster more than once. One day, they finally managed to catch him by luring him with bread. Having dragged the creature on board the ship, seasoned sailors were incredibly amazed by what opened before their eyes. The sea devil had a human body. He had long, thin red hair, shiny fish scales along the entire length of his spine, and there were real gills on his neck. The fisherman took the fishman or man-fish to the nearest monastery. The abbot at first did not want to receive him, but then he took pity. He tried to communicate with the creature in several different languages, but the manfish did not seem to understand him at all. For several long days, the monks tried to get the creature to talk, and they finally succeeded. He squeezed out a word similar to Yerganis. At first, no one understood what it meant. And then one sailor, originally from those places, said that this is a village in the north of Spain. A letter was sent to Yerganis, where they described a strange manfish who was fished out of the sea by fishermen. After some time, an amazing answer came from there that 5 years ago a young man named Francisco disappeared in these places, and he was red-haired. In order to verify the veracity of this seemingly fantastic assumption, the monks went together with the amphibian man to Yerganis. He even took them to the house of his mother, Maria del Casar. The woman almost died on the spot when she saw what her eldest son, whom she had buried for a long time, had turned into. Francisco stayed with his family. He began to lead a seemingly quite normal, quiet life. However, he had very peculiar habits. The young man always walked barefoot, reluctantly used clothes, preferring to walk naked. He also never learned to speak again, barely uttering a few words. It seemed that he didn't even understand the meaning of the words he was saying. The amphibian man had a wonderful appetite, only he ate once a week. He was friendly and kind to everyone, always smiling and doing everything he was told. Francisco lived in his hometown with his mother for about 10 years. One day, as usual, he went swimming in the sea and did not come back. After that, no one ever saw him again. Well, the monk Benito Feijoo first heard about the amphibian man in the early 18th century. At first, he refused to believe in this fantastic story. The scientist has always adhered very strictly to the facts and often debunked such legends. Nevertheless, later it was he who recorded a very detailed story about the young man Francisco who became an amphibian. Now, in the 20th century, a famous scientist from Spain named Gregorio Marañón decided to look into this story, which he considered fiction. He began to study all the facts and evidence. The researchers came to the conclusion that the described Feijoo, that what the Feijoo described is quite real, but it has no connection with the myths about mermaids. He said that according to the description, Francisco was semi-lunatic. He had white skin, a scaly body. Marañón called all these obvious signs of cretinism. At that time, in the Santander area, this disease was quite common. The reason was a lack of iodine in the body of the expectant mother. The symptoms were malformations, thickening of the skin similar to scales, and a goiter on the neck, which could easily be mistaken for gills. The scientist suggested that the young man just got lost and somehow ended up in Cadiz, and there his strange appearance caused a stir, after which a well-known legend was born. The story about the manfish was published in the press. A few years later, a Soviet science fiction writer wrote a whole novel about a man who could live on the seabed. The novel, Человек Amphibia, or Amphibian Man, became a bestseller at the time. It's a cool book. I've read it many times, as did other Soviet boys. In the 1960s, a film of the same name was made based on the book, which was also loved by millions of viewers. This is how an unknown carpenter from a small Spanish village became famous half the world over. So this is the story of the man-fish of the Spanish Empire. And of course, I'll continue to bring you more stories, very interesting ones from Eurasia and other parts of the world, as I have done before. And I attach my playlist about underwater humanoids. So stay tuned. This is a subject that I really like. And I'm sure you will like my future videos. If you can support my research, you can please do so through look at the links attached to the description of this video. Please like my videos and please subscribe to my channel and tell others. Thank you.